They caught him just before dawn, when the swamp still breathed fog and the insects had not yet begun their screaming. The ground was soft with rotten water, sucking at boots and bare feet alike, and the trees stood like black pillars, their roots twisted and exposed as if even the earth had claws here. But wait for a second before we continue towards the video. Let us know in the comments which country you're watching from and what time of day it is for you. And don't forget to subscribe. The black man did not run when the dogs first bayed. He slowed instead. That was the first thing the slave hunters never understood. He had been moving for 3 days through marsh and pine thicket, keeping to water when he could, sleeping only in fragments, listening more than breathing. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, dark with old blood where buckshot had grazed him 2 nights earlier. His left ankle ached, swollen from a misstep into a hidden hole. Any sensible man would have fled harder at the sound of dogs. He did not. He stepped out of the reeds and onto a narrow strip of higher ground exactly where he knew they would want him.
"Got him!"
One of the men shouted, his voice sharp with excitement, like a boy spotting a rabbit. 5 of them came crashing through the brush, white men with rifles, pistols, ropes, and iron collars hanging from saddles. The dogs lunged forward, straining at chains, snarling, teeth flashing white in the gray morning light. The black man raised his hands slowly. Not in surrender, never that, but in calculation. He let his shoulders slump. He let his head drop. He let his breathing grow loud and uneven. "Look at that," another hunter laughed. "Done already." They rushed him, boots splashing through shallow water. One struck him across the back of the head with a rifle stock, not because it was necessary, but because it felt right to him. The blow sent the man to his knees, mud filling his mouth. He tasted iron and earth and did not react beyond a grunt. "That's what you get for running, boy," the leader said. He was a thick-necked man with a red beard and eyes like dull coins. His coat was clean, his boots well kept. He looked like a man who had never feared another human being in his life. The black man was forced flat on his stomach. A knee pressed into his spine. Rough hands searched his pockets, found nothing but a scrap of cloth and a small carved piece of wood he'd carried since childhood. One hunter picked it up, squinted. "What's this trash?" He threw it into the swamp. The man did not look. Ropes bit into his wrists, tight enough to numb his fingers. An iron collar was snapped around his neck with a metallic click that echoed louder in his mind than the gunshots ever had. The weight settled on his shoulders like a promise. They hauled him to his feet and pushed him forward. "Well, I'll be damned," one said, circling him. "Thought you'd be bigger trouble. You look half dead already." Another spat near his feet. "They always think they're smarter than us." The black man said nothing. Silence made them uncomfortable. They wanted begging, crying, promises. They wanted him to speak so they could hear fear in his voice. When he did not, one of them punched him in the ribs hard. He staggered, coughed, caught himself. Still nothing. "Stubborn one," the leader said, amused. "We'll break that on the road." They tied his ankles loosely, not enough to stop him walking, but enough to slow him, and shoved him ahead of the horses. The dogs were released and circled him, snapping close enough that he could feel their breath. They began the march north, away from the swamp and toward the dirt roads that led back to plantations and money. As the sun rose, the mist burned off, revealing the damage the man's body carried. Cuts along his arms, bruises old and new, a tremor in his left leg that he allowed to show. He leaned into it, made it worse than it was. Every stumble earned laughter. "Careful now," one hunter mocked. "Ain't nobody paying full price for broken goods." The leader grinned. "He'll walk, or he'll be dragged." They talked freely as they moved. They always did. Captives were objects, not listeners. $25 easy, one said. "More if he's strong," another replied. "He don't look it." They joked about past hunts, men they'd caught, men who'd fought, men who'd screamed. The dogs grew restless as blood dried and cracked on the captive's skin. The black man listened. He counted steps. He marked voices. He learned which man walked closest, which one lagged, which one adjusted his rifle strap every few minutes. He noticed the leader never checked knots himself. He trusted others to do it. At midday they stopped near a stand of trees where the ground was dry enough to sit. They forced the man down, tied him to a stump, and ate. One tossed him a crust of bread that landed just out of reach. "Fetch," he said, laughing. The black man stared at the dirt. "Aw, come on," the hunter insisted. "Show some spirit." When the man did not move, the hunter kicked the bread into the mud and shrugged. "Suit yourself." They drank from flasks, argued over cards. One wandered off to relieve himself without taking his rifle. The black man watched him go. Then he looked back down. They set off again in the afternoon heat. The road narrowed, the forest thickened. Cicadas screamed now, the sound drilling into the skull. Sweat ran into the man's eyes. He blinked slowly, deliberately, like someone too tired to care. "That's it," one hunter said. "He won't make it another day." The leader smirked. "He'll make it, they always do, long enough." They reached a clearing near evening, a place where the trees opened just enough for a fire. A poor spot, exposed on one side, backed by woods on the other. The black man recognized it. He had been here before, years ago, before he ran, before he learned what men like these truly were. He had passed through this clearing under very different circumstances. He knew the land beyond it. The dips, the roots, the places sound traveled strangely. They did not know that. They tied him to a low tree, tighter this time, and dropped him roughly onto the ground. "Sleep well," one said. "Big day tomorrow." The leader squatted in front of him, close enough that the man could smell tobacco and sweat. "Don't get any ideas," he warned. "Dogs'll tear you apart before you take 2 steps." The black man met his eyes for the first time. There was no fear there, just calm. The leader frowned, unsettled, then stood and turned away, dismissing the moment. The fire crackled as darkness fell. The hunters laughed, drank, and grew careless. One removed his boots, another laid his rifle aside. The dogs were tied, muzzles off, trusting. The black man lay still, breathing shallow, eyes half closed. They thought the hunt was over. They did not know it had just begun. The fire burned low as the night thickened around the clearing. What little light it gave barely pushed back the forest, and the trees beyond stood close together, listening. Crickets sang in waves. Somewhere far off a night bird cried and went silent again. The black man lay on his side near the tree, wrists bound behind him, ankles tied just loose enough to allow pain with every movement. The iron collar rested cold against his throat. He kept his breathing shallow, uneven, the way a beaten man breathes when sleep comes and goes but never settles. He did not sleep. He listened. The hunters were loud at first. They always were. Noise made them feel safe. One of them, thin, sharp-nosed, with a laugh that came too quickly, kept refilling his tin cup from a flask and slapping his knee at his own jokes. Another leaned back on his elbows, staring at the stars through the broken canopy, talking about a woman in Baton Rouge who didn't know what she was missing. The leader sat closest to the fire, cleaning his pistol with slow, confident motions. He hummed under his breath, off-key, unconcerned. "Should have sold that last one quicker," the sharp-nosed man said. "Lost weight after we caught him, ain't right." "Still fetched money," another replied. "They always do." The black man's jaw tightened for a fraction of a second, then relaxed. He let his head loll to the side as if the words meant nothing. The dogs lay tethered a short distance away, gnawing bones thrown from the hunter's supper. Their chains clinked softly when they shifted. They were tired from the day's run, bellies full, noses dull with smoke and grease. That mattered. As the hours passed, voices slurred. Laughter came slower. The fire settled into glowing coals. One by one, the men stretched out on the ground or leaned against logs. Rifles were laid aside within arm's reach, but not in hand. Pistols were slipped into belts loosened for comfort. No one checked the knots again. The black man tested his wrists with a movement so small it could have been a twitch. The rope burned. The knot held. He stopped immediately, patience. He shifted his fingers just enough to feel blood return in sharp pins and needles. He focused on that pain, used it to anchor himself. He counted breaths. He counted the pauses between snores. The sharp-nosed man fell asleep first, mouth open, cups spilling onto the dirt. The one who'd wandered off earlier sat with his back against a tree, eyes closed, rifle across his lap, unsafe, loose. The leader stayed awake the longest, staring into the coals as if reading something there. Eventually, even he rose, stretched and lay down. Silence crept closer. The black man waited longer. When the forest had fully reclaimed the sound, when even the dog's breathing slowed into heavy rhythm, he moved again. This time he rolled his shoulders carefully, easing the rope against a rough patch of bark. He had noticed it earlier, when they tied him. An old tree, its surface broken and sharp in places. He angled his wrists just right and rubbed. Slow, slow. The rope fibers whispered against the wood. He stopped when one of the dogs lifted its head. The animal sniffed, ears twitching. The man froze, breath held, body slack. After a moment, the dog lowered its head again. He resumed. It took a long time. Pain flared and faded. Skin split. Warmth trickled down his palms. But the rope began to give, thread by thread. The night deepened. At last, with a tiny snap felt more than heard, his right hand came free. He did not pull it away. He left it there slack as if still bound, and waited again. Minutes passed. Nothing changed. Only then did he free the other hand. He did not stand. He did not rush. He worked his fingers, flexed them, eased, feeling back. Then he leaned forward, teeth closing around the knot at his ankles. The rope there was looser. A few careful tugs and it slid free. He stayed where he was. This was the moment where foolish men ran. He did not. Instead, he listened again, now with the clarity of someone no longer bound. He knew exactly where each hunter lay. He knew which one snored, which one muttered in his sleep, which one shifted when the fire popped. He turned his head toward the dogs. They were the greatest danger. He reached slowly toward the dirt near his knee, fingers closing around a scrap of greasy bone thrown earlier. He rolled it in his palms, coating it with ash, dulling the smell of blood. Then, inch by inch, he shifted closer to the edge of the clearing, moving only when the fire crackled or a hunter exhaled loudly. When he was close enough, he tossed the bone gently. not at the dogs but past them, into the brush. One dog stirred, then another. Chains rattled softly as they pulled, noses working, attention drawn away from the clearing. The black man slipped into the shadows. The forest accepted him immediately. He moved low, barefoot steps, finding earth instead of roots, water instead of dry leaves. He circled wide, never breaking a twig, never brushing bark with exposed skin. He did not go far, only far enough. He stopped behind a fallen log and waited. Minutes passed, then more. The hunters slept on. Finally, the man who had wandered off earlier, the careless one, shifted, groaned, and sat up. He rubbed his face, stood unsteadily, and staggered toward the edge of the clearing. No rifle, no pistol, just a man in the dark. The black man watched him approach, counting his steps, reading the sway of his body. When the hunter turned his back, fumbling with his belt, the black man moved. It was fast. One arm hooked around the man's throat, cutting sound. The other clamped over his mouth. The hunter kicked, heels scraping dirt, hands clawing uselessly at forearms that felt like iron. The black man dragged him backward, away from the firelight, into the trees. There was a brief wet gasp, then nothing. He lowered the body gently, laying it on its side, face turned into the soil. He searched quickly, took the knife from the belt, a pistol from the boot. He did not take the rifle, too loud, too slow. He wiped his hands on the man's shirt and vanished again. By the time the fire popped and sent sparks up into the night, there were only 4 hunters left in the clearing, and none of them knew it yet. The black man did not leave. He moved closer. He wanted them afraid. Near dawn, one of the dogs began to whine. Not loudly, just enough to stir the men. The sharp-nosed hunter woke first, squinting around. "Hey," he muttered, "where's—" He trailed off. The place where the captive had been tied was empty. Ropes lay slack against the tree, dark with blood. "What the hell," he whispered. He stood, heart beginning to race, and kicked the man beside him. "Wake up." The leader sat up at once, hand on his pistol. His eyes scanned the clearing, sharp now, sober. "Where is he?" he demanded. No one answered. One hunter ran to the tree, fingers trembling as he lifted the ropes. He was right here." The dogs pulled hard at their chains now, barking, noses pointed in different directions, confused. "Find him," the leader snapped. Now they spread out, boots crunching, rifles raised. Then someone screamed. It was short, cut off. They froze. "Where was that?" one whispered. Before anyone could answer, they heard movement in the trees, fast, deliberate circling. The leader's face tightened. They had hunted men for years, but this felt different. And somewhere beyond the firelight, unseen and silent, the black man watched them turn in place, weapons shaking, breath coming fast. He had let them catch him. Now he was done pretending to be prey. The scream left the forest like a knife thrown through the dark, sharp, sudden, and gone too quickly to place. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The 4 remaining slave hunters stood in a loose circle near the dying fire, rifles half raised, eyes wide, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and fear. The sound did not come from far. It had come from close enough to matter. "Who was that?" the sharp-nosed man whispered. No one answered. The dogs strained at their chains, barking now, hackles raised, pulling in opposite directions as if the forest itself were confusing them. One snapped at the air, whining, uncertain. "Hold them," the leader snapped, forcing authority into his voice. "Shut them up." Another hunter grabbed the chains with shaking hands, cursing under his breath as the dogs pulled harder. The fire popped, throwing sparks that briefly lit their faces, pale, drawn, nothing like the men who had laughed hours earlier. "Where's Collins?" someone asked. The name hung there. They all knew who had wandered off earlier. They all knew he should have been back. The leader moved first, stepping toward the edge of the clearing where the scream had come from. He raised his hand, signaling the others to spread out, rifles ready. "Don't fire unless you see him," he ordered. "He wants noise. Don't give it to him." They obeyed, but badly. Spacing was uneven. One man stayed too close to the fire. Another drifted too far into the trees, trying to see everything at once. The black man watched all of it from behind a thick oak, his body pressed flat against the trunk, breath slow and silent. He held the stolen knife low in his right hand, pistol heavy in his left boot. Untouched, he had already moved Collins, body farther back, dragging it through shallow water to break the scent, wedging it between roots where even daylight would struggle to find it. The scream had not been planned, but it had served its purpose. Now fear was loose. A hunter stepped into the trees, boots crunching leaves too loudly. He muttered to himself, trying to sound brave. "Come on now. Come on." The black man shifted, circling, always keeping wood between them. He did not rush. He let the man walk past him, close enough that he could smell sweat and gun oil. He waited. Behind them, the leader cursed softly as he reached the empty space where Collins should have been. He saw scuffed earth, a drag mark, faint but there if you knew how to look. His jaw tightened. "This ain't right," he muttered. He turned back toward the clearing. "Everyone back in, now." The words came too late. A gunshot exploded from the trees, not aimed at a man but into the dirt near the fire. Sparks flew. One hunter cried out and fell backward, convinced he'd been hit. Panic surged. "There!" someone shouted, firing blindly into the darkness. The black man had already moved. He stayed low, sprinting through a shallow dip he knew would swallow sound. He came up behind the hunter who drifted too far, the youngest of the group, breathing fast, eyes darting. The man turned, too slow. The knife slid under his ribs, angled up, precise. The hunter gasped, hands flying to his chest, rifle slipping from his grasp. The black man caught him, lowering him gently, whispering nothing. The body went still. 3 left. Shouts rang out as the others realized someone was missing. The dogs howled now, sensing blood and chaos, pulling so hard the stakes creaked. "Stay together," the leader roared. "He's trying to split us." They regrouped near the fire, backs nearly touching, rifles sweeping wildly. The sharp-nosed man was crying openly now, tears streaking through dirt on his cheeks. "We should leave," he said. "Just go, forget him." "And let him run free," the leader snapped. "He'll come for us anyway." As if summoned by the words, something struck the ground near their feet, a knife thrown hard, embedding itself in the dirt. They jumped back, shouting. "He's right there," someone screamed, but there was nothing. Only trees. Only dark. The black man moved again, keeping them turning, keeping them guessing. He rattled brush here, snapped a twig there, always just out of sight, always close enough to feel. One hunter fired again. The recoil knocked him off balance. Before he could recover, a shape slammed into him from the side. They went down together. The rifle clattered away. The hunter screamed, flailing, but the sound was cut short as his head struck a root with a dull crack. He lay still, eyes staring, blood seeping into the leaves. 2 left. The sharp-nosed man was shaking so hard his teeth clattered. I can't see him," he sobbed. The leader grabbed his collar and shoved him upright. "You listen to me," he hissed. "He bleeds like anyone else. He ain't a ghost." A shadow moved behind him. The leader sensed it too late. The black man struck from behind, wrapping an arm around his throat, pulling him backward into the dark. The leader fought hard, elbows flying, boots digging furrows in the soil. He was strong, stronger than the others. They crashed into a tree. The leader slammed his head back, catching the black man's face. Pain flared white. The grip loosened for half a second. That was all the leader needed. He twisted free, drew his pistol and fired. The shot tore through bark inches from the black man's head. Splinters cut his cheek. He dropped low, rolling as another shot boomed overhead. The sharp-nosed man ran. He didn't look back. He tore through the trees, sobbing, crashing, branches whipping his face. He didn't see the drop until it was too late. He fell hard into a shallow ravine, knocking the breath from his lungs. He lay there gasping, helpless. The black man stood above him, silhouette framed against the faintest hint of dawn. "Please," the hunter croaked. "Please." The black man said nothing. When he turned back toward the clearing, only the leader remained. They faced each other across the broken firelight, both breathing hard, both bloodied now. The leader's confidence was gone, replaced by something darker and sharper. "You planned this," he said hoarsely. The black man stepped forward. "Yes." The leader raised his pistol again. The forest held its breath, and somewhere, just beyond the trees, morning waited. The pistol shook in the leader's hand, not from weakness of muscle but from the sudden understanding that the rules he had lived by no longer applied. The fire between them had collapsed into embers, glowing red like watchful eyes, casting just enough light to reveal the blood on both men. The black man did not rush him. That was the second mistake the leader could not understand. "You think this ends here?" the leader said, voice raw, forcing breath into bravado. "You think you walk away from this?" The black man stepped forward, slow, deliberate, boots silent on dirt and ash. His cheek was cut where bark had torn him. Blood traced a thin line down his jaw. His eyes never left the pistol. "It already ended," he said quietly. The sound of his voice, calm, steady, unafraid, hit harder than any blow. The leader fired. The shot cracked the morning air, echoing through the trees. The black man twisted at the last instant, felt heat tear past his ribs, and slammed shoulder first into the leader's chest. The pistol flew from the man's hand, skidding across the dirt into the dying coals with a hiss. They went down hard. The leader was heavier, stronger, years of violence carved into his body. He rolled on top, fist slamming into the black man's face. Stars burst behind the black man's eyes. Another punch followed, then another. "This is what you are," the leader snarled between blows. "Property." The black man locked his legs around the leader's waist and bucked, throwing him off balance just enough to roll sideways. They separated, both scrambling to their feet. The leader lunged for a fallen rifle. The black man reached it first, but he didn't fire. Instead, he snapped the stock across the leader's forearm. Bone cracked. The leader screamed, collapsing to one knee, clutching his arm as the rifle dropped uselessly to the ground. "Please," the leader gasped, the word slipping out before pride could stop it. The black man stood over him, breathing hard now, chest rising and falling like a bellows. For a moment the forest was quiet except for their breath and the distant barking of the dogs, still tethered, still confused. "You didn't beg," the black man said, "not once." The leader looked up, eyes wide with something close to terror. "I'll let you go," he said desperately. "I swear it. You walk away, I won't follow." The black man shook his head slowly. "You hunted people," he said. "You taught me how." He struck once more, precise, final. When it was over, the black man stepped back, wiping his hands on the dirt. The leader lay still, eyes open, staring at nothing. The fire sighed and collapsed inward, sending a final plume of sparks into the pale sky. Dawn had come. Gray light filtered through the trees, revealing the clearing in full, the abandoned camp, scattered weapons, dark stains soaking into the earth. The dogs strained harder now, barking frantically, sensing death all around them. The black man turned to them. They were tools, just like the men had been. Dangerous ones, but not evil. He approached slowly, speaking low, steady. The dogs snarled, then hesitated, confused by a voice that held no fear. He loosened the chains one by one, careful to stay out of reach of teeth. When he stepped back, they bolted, not toward him but into the woods, disappearing as fast as they had once chased him. Silence returned. He moved through the clearing, collecting what he needed. A coat, a pouch of dried meat, a flask with a swallow left. He did not take money. He did not take trophies. At the edge of the trees he paused and looked back once. He remembered every laugh, every boot, every chain. Then he turned away. He moved south, not north, away from roads, away from places men went easily. The land opened and closed around him as he walked, water and forest swallowing his tracks. By mid-morning, riders passed the clearing. They found chaos, horses tied but restless, fire dead, no hunters, no captive, broken chains hanging from a tree dark with blood, weapons scattered as if dropped in panic. They searched, found signs of struggle, drag marks that vanished into water, blood that led nowhere, no bodies. By afternoon, rumors began. A hunter in town swore he heard screaming in the woods at dawn. Another claimed dogs returned alone, eyes wild, chains dragging. A plantation owner sent men to look, but they came back pale, shaken, refusing to go farther. By nightfall, the story had already changed. They said a captured slave had turned feral. They said a ghost walked the swamp. They said the woods themselves had risen up. None of them spoke the truth. Far from the clearing, moving through tall grass and shallow streams, the black man walked with measured steps. His body ached. His face was swollen, but his spine was straight, his eyes clear. For the first time in years, no chains pulled at his wrists. He did not know where he would go, only that he would not be hunted today, and somewhere behind him, in a forest that would never forget, fear had finally learned its own name. By the second night, the forest had learned his weight. The black man moved through it with a rhythm that no longer fought the land but followed it. His steps fell where leaves were already pressed flat. He crossed streams upstream, then doubled back through water to break whatever faint trail might remain. When he rested, it was never where the ground showed his shape for long. Pain followed him like a shadow. His ribs burned when he breathed too deep. His cheek had stiffened and swollen, skin split and crusted with dried blood. Every muscle carried the memory of the fight, the weight of bodies, the sudden stillness after. But pain was familiar, fear was not, that belonged to other men now. He paused on a low ridge just before dusk, crouching among palmetto and scrub oak. Below him, the land dipped into a shallow basin where an old road cut through, barely used but used enough to matter. Wagon ruts filled with rainwater glimmered faintly. He waited. It did not take long. Hoofbeats reached him first, distant and cautious. Then voices, low, tense, carrying the brittle edge of men who had already heard something was wrong. 5 riders emerged from the trees, moving slowly, rifles across their saddles, eyes scanning the shadows. Not slave hunters, not the kind he had faced before, but local men drawn by rumor, by absence, by the sudden vanishing of people who were supposed to return with money and stories. They stopped near the basin, one dismounted, crouching to inspect the ground. "Dogs came through here," he muttered. "Yesterday, maybe." Another spat, "and didn't come back." They shared a look. "No man does this alone," one said. "Ain't natural." The black man watched them with a stillness so complete even insects settled near him without alarm. He did not plan to fight them. Not yet. They were not his hunters, not truly, but fear, once seated, does not need permission to grow. A branch snapped far to the east. One of the riders jumped, spinning his horse too hard. The animal reared, whining. "Easy," the man hissed, heart racing. Silence followed, thick. Expectant, the black man shifted slightly, letting moonlight catch the iron collar still around his neck, just for a second. Just enough. One rider sucked in a sharp breath. "Did you see that?" "See what?" "There, by the trees." They raised rifles, aiming at nothing. The black man was already gone. He circled wide, moving downhill, letting his scent drift across the basin. The horses snorted, uneasy. One man cursed under his breath. "This is foolish," another said. "We should wait till morning." A scream cut through the night, not close, not far, but unmistakably human. It did not belong to any of them. The riders froze. "That came from the north," someone whispered. "From the old trail." They did not know that the scream had been a trick of voice and wind, thrown and shaped by a man who had learned how sound traveled in trees. Panic did the rest. One rider spurred his horse and bolted. Another followed. The remaining three hesitated, then broke apart, each choosing a different direction rather than stay together. The black man did not chase. He let fear work. By morning, word spread faster than riders could travel. In one town, they said a patrol had seen him standing in the road, chains hanging loose, eyes glowing. In another, they swore he spoke no words, only pointed, and men vanished. Plantation owners argued in low voices. Rewards were discussed, then quietly reduced, then abandoned altogether. No one wanted to be first. A slave catcher passing through refused a job outright. Not near that region, he said. Ain't worth it. The forest changed. It always did when men stopped walking through it with certainty. Days passed. The black man moved south and east, never staying long, never following straight lines. Once he stole bread from a smokehouse and left the door open behind him. Another time he untied a horse and sent it wandering free into the trees. He was not cruel, he was deliberate. At a river crossing he found signs of men waiting. Fresh boot prints, a broken reed where someone had crouched too long. He did not approach the water. Instead he waded upstream for half a mile, crossed where the banks were steep, then doubled back on the far side. When the men waited all night and saw nothing, their fear curdled into something worse than anger. Whispers followed him now. They said he chose when to be seen, that he let himself be captured once just to teach a lesson. The chains could not hold him. None of it was true, and all of it was. One evening he came upon a small cabin at the edge of the woods. Smoke rose thin from the chimney. Light glowed in the single window. He watched from a distance as a woman stepped outside, scanning the tree line before drawing water. She moved quickly. Carefully, she knew. The black man did not approach. He turned away, slipping deeper into shadow. This was not a place for him. Not yet, maybe never. Later that night he climbed a low hill and looked out over the land. Fires dotted the distance, settlements, plantations, towns that believed themselves permanent. He touched the iron collar at his throat. The metal was cold, stubborn. He could remove it, had the tools, the time. But he did not yet. Let them see it, he thought. Let them remember. By the end of the week, patrols stopped venturing into the woods alone. Dogs refused to track beyond certain lines. Men who once bragged now drank in silence, glancing over their shoulders when the wind shifted. No body was ever found. No proof, only absence. And somewhere between the trees and the water, between rumor and truth, the black man continued on, wounded, alive, unchained in every way that mattered. Fear had changed sides, and it was not going back. Weeks passed, and the land did what it always did when men stopped forcing their will upon it. It healed, slowly, quietly, without ceremony. Boot prints softened and vanished. Blood darkened, then disappeared beneath rain and new growth. Even the clearing where the fire had burned returned to itself, grass pushing through ash, birds returning cautiously, as if testing whether the danger had truly gone. But stories did not fade as easily. They spread along riverbanks and dirt roads, carried in whispers between work and sleep. They changed shape depending on who told them. But the center held firm. A captured black man had not broken. The hunt had turned. The hunters had vanished. No one said his name. Some claimed not to know it. Others said names had power and preferred not to use them. Plantations adjusted without announcing why. Night patrols doubled, then quietly stopped. Overseers who once rode deep into the woods now stayed close to lantern light. Dogs refused to track past certain boundaries, whining and pulling back as if sensing something the men could not. Fear had become a condition of the place. The black man moved through the outer edges of that fear, never standing in its center. He learned the patterns of avoidance, where men would no longer go, where roads emptied early, where rivers were crossed only at midday in groups. He used that knowledge the same way they once had, but he did not hunt. He passed through. One evening, near the end of summer, he stood on a rise overlooking a broad stretch of lowland. The air was heavy with heat and the smell of distant rain. Fireflies blinked in scattered rhythm, tiny signals against the dark. Below him lay a plantation, quiet in the way places became when pretending nothing was wrong. Lamps burned low, voices were muted. Even laughter, when it came, stopped too quickly. He watched for a long time. He thought of the men who would never return to such places, of chains left rusting, of collars buried in soil or hanging in memory. He touched the iron at his throat again, fingers tracing the edge. Tonight, he decided. He waited until full dark, then moved to a shallow creek where water ran fast over stone. He knelt, braced himself, and worked carefully, using a wedge of sharpened metal he had carried since the first night. It took time. The collar resisted, stubborn as the belief that had put it there. When it finally broke, the sound was small, a dull snap swallowed by running water. The weight lifted from his shoulders. He held the iron in his hands for a moment, feeling its cold familiarity. Then he lowered it into the current and watched as the water claimed it, pulling it under, tumbling it out of sight. He stood lighter, not free of memory, not free of consequence, but lighter. By morning he was gone from that region entirely. Months later, travelers still spoke carefully when passing through the woods near the old swamp. They said paths shifted there, that compasses lied, that men who went in angry came out quieter, or not at all. Some claimed they saw him once, standing at the edge of the trees, watching silently. Others said that was foolishness, that the man had escaped north or west or died of wounds long after. No one could prove anything. That was the truth of it. In one small town, a former slave catcher refused a drink and left when someone joked about old hunts. In another, a young boy asked why his father never went into the forest anymore and received no answer. The black man became less a person than a boundary, a line no one wished to cross, and somewhere far away, in land that did not yet know his story, he walked on. He worked when he had to, he hid when it was wise, he helped when he could without being seen. At night sometimes, he dreamed of firelight and laughing voices, but he always woke with his hands empty of rope, his throat free of iron. That was enough. The world did not change all at once. It never did, but in one place at least, the hunt had ended, and everyone knew why.